If you have read the famous Spanish novel Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, you'll surely remember the self-proclaimed knight, Don Quixote. The novel vividly portrays him riding a gaunt old horse, bravely yet comically battling windmills. His actions, filled with absurdity, included mistaking an innkeeper for a feudal lord and insisting on being knighted, and even perceiving a plump peasant woman as a noble lady, to whom he devoted his blind love and loyalty. While the absurd actions of Don Quixote in Cervantes' novel may seem comical and ridiculous to modern readers, these behaviors actually do not represent the medieval endorsement of the spirit of chivalry. Instead, they are more of a satire on the outdated ideals of knighthood. Knights were a special social class in medieval Europe, first appearing in the Frankish kingdom. With the establishment of the feudal system by the 11th century, the institution of knighthood had evolved into a more structured system. However, starting from the 14th century, the system of knighthood began to decline. So, how did this knightly class arise? In the early Frankish kingdom, the king relied on a cavalry composed of minor landlords to suppress internal unrest and expand territory. To achieve long-term stability, the king altered the previous system of unconditional land grants, distributing lands conquered in wars to frontline commanders. These enfeoffed commanders had to fulfill certain feudal obligations to the king and swear loyalty. Subsequently, the king's major feudal lords also started enfeoffing their lands to subordinates in a similar manner. This cascading system of enfeoffment eventually formed multiple ranks under the king, such as dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts, and knights, constituting the feudal hierarchy. In the social hierarchy of the Middle Ages, knights were actually the lowest rank of nobility. Lacking titles and fixed territories, their primary duty was mounted combat. By the 11th century, with the rise of Western European cities and feudal lords' plundering of land, the system of primogeniture was established. This meant a father's title and land could only be passed to the eldest son, leaving other sons without inheritance. Their sole option was to become knights. However, becoming a knight was not easy. It required ennoblement by a higher-ranking noble, such as an earl or duke. Upon receiving their knighthood, they typically also obtained one or several small manors as their source of livelihood. If these knights desired more and larger estates, their only path was through plunder. They could either act independently to rob or follow their lord into battle to acquire spoils of war. For a considerable time, the title of knight was a symbol of honor. Thus, feudal lords of all levels in Western Europe considered themselves embodiments of this honor. They ruled their domains and, alongside the king, governed the nation with sword and might. The life of a knight was filled with adventure and combat. They seemed to live for the king, faith and love, constantly immersed in battles. Becoming a knight meant that every boy from a noble family had to start rigorous training from a young age, preparing for countless future battles. During this period, noble children were usually sent to serve as pages in the households of lords higher in status than their own family, beginning around the ages of 7 or 8. There, they served the lord's lady and family, learning to recite poetry, sing, play musical instruments, and master the etiquette of court and noble society. They also learned skills like chess, horseback riding, swimming, javelin throwing, and fencing. At 14, these youths became squires or apprentice knights, serving primarily the ladies or daughters of the lord, from whom they learned various courtesies. They also needed to learn how to treat noble women with politeness and consideration, embodying the spirit of devotion to ladies. When the lord went to war, the squires accompanied him, taking care of the equipment, weapons, and horses, and learning combat skills in real battles. It was only when they reached the age of 21 that these young men were eligible to become true knights through a formal dubbing ceremony. The knight dubbing ceremony was a solemn and ancient tradition. It began with the young nobles undergoing a bathing and purification ritual, symbolizing the transition from youth to adulthood. Afterwards, they entered a church where they guarded their armor and weapons throughout the night and prayed, expressing reverence for the divine and the spirit of chivalry. Early the next day, these prospective knights returned to the castle for the formal dubbing ceremony. Assisted by older knights, they donned armor and were girded with a sword. Then, kneeling on one knee before the Lord, they swore oaths of loyalty to defend the faith, protect women, and commit to chivalrous deeds and aiding the weak and poor. After the oath, the Lord would lightly tap their shoulders with his palm or the flat of a sword, symbolizing official recognition. At this point, these young men were formally knighted. After becoming knights, these noble offspring typically embarked on journeys to build their reputation for bravery and accomplishment. For those knights without lands or of lower status, their lives were often filled with combat and adventure. They might resort to robbery or fighting to make a living, and sometimes to demonstrate their courage or win the favor of women, they would engage in fierce duels with strangers they encountered on the road, which could sometimes result in severe injuries or death. A poem describing the life of a knight goes like this: "I am a knight, riding forth, seeking a man who, armed like me, wishes to fight. If he can defeat me, his reputation will rise. If I triumph over him, I shall be hailed as a hero. I will gain respect as never before." In the world of knights, there were strict rules of combat and codes of ethics. For example, before launching an attack, a knight had to ensure that his opponent had ample time to prepare for battle. In 1327, Scottish King Robert the Bruce adhered to this convention, giving advance notice to English King Edward of his impending attack, a gesture of respect for true knightly conduct. For a knight, launching a surprise attack was considered dishonorable. Additionally, there was a convention regarding the treatment of captives. When a knight captured another knight, he was obliged to treat the prisoner with respect, even if they had been enemies. An example from the 100 Years' War illustrates this. On New Year's Eve in 1384, King Edward III of England invited captured French knights to join his banquet. Knights adhered to a code of chivalry and knightly virtues, emphasizing honor, loyalty, defense of the faith, valor, and respect for women. These ideals were vividly embodied in medieval European literature, such as the French Song of Roland, the German Nibelungenlied, and the English Arthurian legends. In these works, respect and veneration of women were integral to the knightly spirit. Young knights not only pledged loyalty to women, but also chose a lady or noble maiden as their revered idol. They showed extreme respect and absolute obedience to these admired figures. Knights' ladies could even demand various difficult tasks from them, which the knights were obliged to fulfill unconditionally, even in the face of great danger and hardship. This reverence and veneration of women gradually evolved into a social fashion known as chivalrous conduct. Under this ethos, knights were exceedingly respectful, dignified, and elegant in their behavior and speech in the presence of women. This respect for women was later inherited by modern society and evolved into what is known as gentlemanly conduct. Despite the Middle Ages being viewed as a dark and chaotic era, it still had its shining moments. Thank you for watching, and let's continue to explore more fascinating stories in the river of history. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and see you in the next video.